Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast. This is a conversation with, and I am your host, Floyd Marshall Jr. And today I am joined by, in my opinion, the most important guest that I have had come on this show since its inception. No shade to anyone else that has ever come on this show, but today's topic is something that you hear me speak about a lot. And that is your film being a product and it being part of, if not the most important part of your business as a filmmaker. So I am so excited to have today on the show Joanne Butcher, who is a expert when it comes to getting funding and financing and distribution for your film. There are so many things I can say about this, but I am not the expert. She is, so I'm going to let her talk about it. So let me give you just a small snippet of what Joanne has been doing for the last umpteen years. Joanne Butcher is a consulting producer with over 100 independent filmmakers under her belt with a wealth of experience in fundraising and distribution. Joanne has a proven track record of facilitating the sale of numerous feature films. You definitely want that. And participating in the distribution of 17 feature films, something you definitely want to be a part of. And as an expert in fundraising, Joanne has supported her clients through various channels, including major donors, grants, foundations, corporate sponsorships, and over 40 successful crowdfunding campaigns. And that's just a small snippet of what she does. And I'm just going to let her give you some background and insight into the amazing things that she does. So, Ms. Butcher, welcome to a conversation with
Miss Butcher. No, Joanne, please.
Joanne. Okay, Joanne.
Yes, Floyd, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you for all the kind words. It's really great to be on this show because it's kind of rare in the film world that I meet somebody who's as interested in the business side of things as I am. And so I just appreciate that you understand the importance of this for filmmakers.
Awesome, awesome. And I have to say, ladies and gentlemen, Joanne is someone that I came across via Clubhouse, being in certain rooms with her and being on, having the privilege of being on certain stage with her, and then also going into her room. That what day do you do your room? I can't remember.
Tuesdays, every
Okay.
Tuesday at 12:30 Eastern time,
Yeah. Well,
9:30 Pacific.
okay. And that was an absolutely amazing room. Now, normally at that time I'm at work.
Ah,
But
okay.
when I'm not, excuse me for a second. Sitting here chewing gum. But my acting coach would have been very upset with that. You're not supposed to be chewing gum on camera. Sorry, Mindy Sills, blame it on my head and my heart. But normally I'm at work at that time of day. But when I'm not, I always make sure that I come in your room if I just sit in the audience and listen, because you always give a master class and you always have such, intriguing guests and insightful people. So that's something that I always look forward to when I get an opportunity to come in.
I
But
don't know if you know this, Floyd, but I started that clubhouse room because two reasons. One, because I wanted to make sure that there were people on Clubhouse talking about film
mhm,
who really had experience, so I have this rule that the moderators in my room have delivered at least one feature film to the distributor. So they've
mhm.
started out with a script, an idea, script, raised the money, produced the film, and I have several moderators who come on who've made multiple films. But the other reason I did it was just so I could hang out with my clients.
Oh,
So
nice.
I have so nearly all the moderators are my clients.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and they have made at least one feature film. Now, like one of my clients, he'll probably be back on next week, but he's going to be shooting his fifth film that he's made with me in the
Mhm.
spring. His fifth feature film.
Wow, that is absolutely amazing. A film that you helped get him financing for?
Yeah. So all
Oh,
my clients, I
wow.
help them raise money, help them. And in his case, actually, we are in the middle of next month, in the middle of November, we are going to the International Christian Video Market, I think it's called, in Nashville, Tennessee. And we're going to be pitching to some Christian film companies a film that he's just about finished. It's in his fourth film, is in post-production, and then pitching the next one to them
Oh,
as well.
oh, that is absolutely amazing. Wow. So that is amazing. Your track record is amazing. But let's start at the beginning. How did you get your start in the film industry? How did that come about?
Gosh, that's a great question. Well, I moved to Miami from London. This is back in the 80s, and I was doing a master's degree in English, and I had no money whatsoever. And I was invited to these arts events because they said I could come and put out the chairs. I could put out the chairs, and I could go for free. So I said, okay. So I started doing that, and I ended up hanging out with all these artists. And I took a class in film. I took Super 8 film classes. And then we decided to start showing experimental art movies. We started showing those, and then we ended up opening a cinema.
Mm.
So at the time, I was in my early 20s, and I was the girl with the funny accent who I used to always wear big hats. And I was, a volunteer. And little by little, I ended up running the cinema and running the film school that we had as part of that. And part of my job it was a first run cinema, which means we showed movies when they first came out, when they, got press and all of that. We had to report the numbers, the box office numbers in to the distribution companies. And we had to sell tickets, So we were very, very popular. People drove from all over to come and see our movies, and the movies we showed were kind of the smaller art house films. We tended to show films that ended up getting 4 stars in the New York Times.
Mm.
We showed films from all over the world, and then, as I said, we had a film school. I used to teach script writing. We taught all kinds of different things with film. And then when I took over the organization, it was a $500,000 a year organization, and I had already been fundraising to run the organization. Nearly all fundraisers have no training. They learn on the job. It's like, oh, we need $500,000. I bet somebody better get it, And then I looked around and I thought, well, we're doing a really great job of helping beginner filmmakers, but what about the more advanced ones? So I got this focus group together with people who'd made at least one feature film. And I said, well, how can we help you? And they just said, we need money. We need money. So I put together a competition. It was called the Florida Feature Film Competition. And there was a prize of $25,000 cash and $175,000 of goods and services. And we gave that prize to a film. Of the 6 finalists, I know of at least 4 of those films that got made, those feature films that got made. And so there's something about me and my brain that I'm less interested in making one film than making 6, making 10, And of the 6 producers who were the finalists in that, 2 of them have gone on to be very successful film producers, Jamin O'Brien and Brian Benson. They've both taken 5, 6, 7, 8 films to Sundance. And so the process of the competition, the whole purpose of the competition was to train filmmakers how to put together a business plan, how to put together a budget, and they were being judged on all of those things. So then after that, I ended up leaving film the organization that I was running just completely fell apart. Not, I would say, to do with me, but other things. There is no IFP Miami anymore. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm getting out. I'm leaving film. And I decided to move to San Francisco and start running capital campaigns. So in the fundraising world, capital campaigns are when you raise millions and millions of dollars to build buildings. So I became a fundraising specialist, building buildings, raising millions of dollars. And I was like, I'm not interested in film anymore. But then I had only been doing that for a few years when I became ill. And I went from working towards my second triathlon to too sick to work for 7 years. And so I was in bed for 7 years. I lost everything. My health, first of all, you know, my apartment, my job, my career, everything. And 7 years later, when I started to get a little bit better, when I realized, well, you know, if I could work 2 hours a week, why don't I go back to working with filmmakers? They're my favorite people. So 6 years ago, that's how I started. I was probably working 2 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours a week. Now I work full time. And, you know, when I look at the list of projects that we have in development, you know, I now have 20. I think you read 17. 20 in distribution. I have 2 in a test screening process right now. I just heard 2 films that were shot in July are in post-production. One was shot in the state of Georgia. One was shot in Nepal. I have a film shot in Nepal. Wow. And so there's, by the end of the year, there'll be 22, 24, 25 films in distribution.
Wow.
I have about 140 feature films in various stages of development, including that 20 that's already in distribution, and more films coming along. And most of them have been made for micro budget, $150,000, $200,000. And then this year, for the first time, I have several films that are like a 1.5, 1.7 million, up to 5 million. So this will be 24 to 25 will be the first year that we have films with A-list actors and things like that. So things are going to be changing.
Wow. So let's go back, because you talked about when you started raising funds for filmmakers, but that kind of happened by accident. I was listening, I did some research, and the way you got into, you know, raising money and, you know, doing grants is because someone asked you to do a favor for them, and you ended up taking a plane ride and doing a 2-day intensive on grant writing. So can you talk about that a little bit? Because, you know, a little bit of the backstory on how you got into actually beginning your journey as someone who became an expert at actually telling people how to finance their films.
That, I'm so glad you remember that story. So I was at the University of Miami. I had no money. So every call that came into the English department that said, we need to hire an English student to do something or other, I took every job, whatever it was. So this lady called and she said, I have a dance company and I need to hire somebody to help me write grants. I said, I can do that.
Of course I can. That's what I do.
Writing. She said writing. I was like, writing. That's okay. It's writing. So I was supposed to start on the Monday. I was supposed to go to her office on the Monday. On the Friday, she called me and she said, Joanne, I have a very strange request for you, but I was supposed to be going to Tallahassee this weekend to watch our grant be assessed by a panel. This is commonly how nonprofit grants are decided, right? And she said, and something's come up and I can't go. Would you be willing to fly to Tallahassee and go to this 2-day grants panel? I said, okay. And she said, and would you be willing to stay at my friend's house? Because that's what I was going to do. And I was like, okay. So I go and stay at her friend's house. Rebecca Terrell was the head of the Florida Dance Association. She and I became friends like this for years. And so I go to this grant panel, and it was all day long for all day Saturday, all day Sunday. And my job was to go back to Dale with notes and tell her what happened, because she wasn't going to be there. So I got to listen and take notes for 2 days while perhaps 8 people who were experts in dance made decisions about which grants to fund and which grants not to fund. And in the arts funding world, it's always the case that I'm going to make up some numbers, but let's say there were 30 grants that were applying for 30 different dance companies. And the panel got it down to the top 10. And those top 10 are requesting each $50,000 each. So that's $500,000. But the panel only has $200,000. Now, and this is the case with every single grant, now they picked 10 that they thought were great, 10. These should be funded. But that 10 adds up to $500,000. So what do? Now they have to start looking for reasons to not fund a project. They look for reasons to not fund an excellent project because they've got to get down from 500,000 down to 200,000. And the level of discussion when you start to go from, well, these are great, but you know what? Let's find something that we can eliminate from them. And I swear, I tell this all the time because I say I learned everything I needed to know about grant writing from those 2 days. Because when you have people who are very experts and totally sincere and they want to fund all those 10 projects, but they can't, now they're going to start finding things to say are wrong, which the first go round, there was nothing wrong with them. And so that's when you hear the level of conversation. And I always say, in Florida, it's a sunshine state. So any member of the public can always go to any grant panel. And I always say, go and see what you can learn so that you can improve the quality of your proposals and your grants that you write. So that was how I started out in fundraising. But in fundraising, until you become a professional fundraiser, there's no training. There's no training to become a fundraiser. It doesn't exist. And so when I was a professional fundraiser, then I was able to get training. But the training I offer is really it doesn't exist. There's no film schools that train you in fundraising. There's no, every documentary filmmaker who has to write grants, they've never got training, And sometimes you'll find somebody offers some sort of training, but not something significant, So I do it. I train filmmakers how to raise money. Wow. And grant writing is just one way of raising money.
Wow. So now you also said something else about when you came down with your unfortunate illness that basically had you out of doing this for 7 years, but you had a conversation with a friend who stopped by and did basically a collage and told you that the thing that you didn't want to do anymore is the very thing that you should be doing. And you talked about the fear of the thing is what held you back from doing that. So if you were talking to any filmmaker that's basically frozen in place with something that they love, but they're afraid to take action, how would you approach talking to a filmmaker about that?
That's a very complex answer to a simple question, because every filmmaker is stuck in their own particular way. So on the one hand, there are certain places where filmmakers get stuck, and I might be able to list those out as 5, 6, 7 places. I'll give you one example. One is I've made 2 shorts. I spent $5,000 on each of my shorts. I want to make my first feature film, and I need $5 million to make my first feature. Floyd is like,
hey, look, I'm not mad. You went for the gusto.
So a lot of filmmakers are stuck in this place that they don't even realize they will never, ever be able to make that $5 million movie. And I've met filmmakers stuck right there for years and years and years and years and years, not realizing what you realized instantly when I said that story, which was, no, $5 million is not going to work. I have a client, very sensible person, very experienced, who before she met me was shopping a $69 million movie.
Wow.
And, you know, filmmakers will say, well, you know, I hired a line producer and this is the budget. You know, so there are certain places that filmmakers get stuck and they don't realize every other filmmaker is stuck in the same place, right? So another filmmaker may say, oh, okay, I made a short for $5,000. I made another short for $5,000. Now I want to make a feature film and I'm going to do it for $50,000. I'm going to do it for $100,000. And then they say, well, how do I get $100,000? I mean, I saved up my $5,000 to make my short, and then I saved up for another whole year to make my second short. But how do I save up to make right? So, and a lot of filmmakers want to get to that next step, which is a more sensible step, obviously, but they still don't have any clue about how to raise $50,000 or $100,000 or $200,000. So most of my clients, when I'm saying I have 20 films in distribution, they're raising that kind of money, 100, 70, 80, 100, 120, those kind of numbers. And then it's really based on that competition that I did all those years ago, that Florida film competition. $25,000 cash, $175,000 worth of goods and services, otherwise known as getting things for free, which in the film industry is called producing. So I don't have my clients raise $25,000 anymore. I start at 40.
Okay.
We start at 40. We raise 40 as a minimum. And then I've had several people where we say, they're like, okay, well, I'll raise $40,000. And then they end up raising 70, you know? So we just set goals that are modest and achievable. Okay. You know, and then I have other clients. As I said, this year now there's going to be three films at about $1.5 to $2 million, and one of them is from Puerto Rico. She won a grant for $1.3 million. Oh. Yeah, the others raise money from investors, and now I have just started offering a new service, which I've never offered before, where I'm going to raise some money for those films. So I have started to work with some investors who are interested in larger budget films. And so I'm going to close that fundraising for those clients. But I just started offering that this year.
Oh, wow.
Most of my clients, I teach them, they raise the money.
Okay. Wow. So raising the money, you can't do that without actually having something phenomenal and something tangible. So can you talk about the importance of the script in the process of raising money?
Well, that's funny. I just got off the phone with a relatively new client, and so the first thing I always work on with my clients is this a marketable script? And so my clients, all filmmakers, I always say this, filmmakers are my favorite people. Filmmakers are always thinking about the creative, you know, which is great. And they're completely dedicated and they, you know, so he had thought about the creative and he wrote this script and it's really enjoyable. But it's a thriller and he has the dead body show up pretty much in the last page. And I said, I'm a thriller fan. And a thriller fan has to know on the first page that this is a thriller. I'm not a big comedy person,
Mhm.
and I like to joke with people. I say, you know, I really don't get comedies, you know, because where's the dead body?
Mm.
You know, I love thrillers. I love thrillers, and in a thriller, you tend to have the body on the first page.
Yes.
Right? So that the thriller fan like me can relax and say, I know something bad is going to happen. You know? I know it's going to get scary, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Horror is the same. Horror is the same. You got to know, like in Get Out, which has to be one of the all-time best horror films. Lakeith Stanfield, in the opening scene, Lakeith Stanfield is nicely dressed. He's wandering up and down a suburban street. He's like, I don't know, I can't see at 27. I don't know. I was back there, and he's lost, right? But he's Black. And, you know, all Black audiences were very clear that that was a really scary scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then for white audiences, we finally have a car slowly come up and somebody gets out and shoves him in the trunk.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then we can go off for basically 2 acts and hang out with the couple, and they're going on the trip and they're going to see the, but we knew in the opening scene something really bad is going to happen.
Yes. Yes.
So I was talking to this client about this. He's very much about art with a capital A, you know. But I went over basically the concepts of what makes something marketable, you know. And if I take a thriller to a distributor, it can be a micro budget film. It doesn't have to have any famous people in it. If I take a thriller to a sales agent, they're going to buy it. If I take a horror film, they're going to buy it. It doesn't need names. It doesn't need anything like that. But the script needs to be marketable. But so the things I'm looking for are not the kind of things that, you know, people who do, what's it, the professionals who do script feedback and things like
Script
that.
doctors.
Script doctors, yeah. It's not that, because I'm not looking at the script in terms of the excellence of the script. I'm looking at very practical things. What I've noticed, though, is that as the filmmaker starts to think about the business, the quality of the writing goes up. I'm not quite sure what that's about, but I see it happen. Now I just totally relax about it, because the script is going to get better the more that the filmmaker starts to connect with, my script is to reach an audience.
Right.
It's not about, you know, something that's in my head. It's about reaching an audience. So it's like when I used to run the cinema and I worked with a distributor and I picked the movies and we put up the posters and we got the local journalists to write the reviews and we sold tickets. Because ultimately, a film is designed to sell tickets. And we showed all kinds of art films, art with a capital A films, you know, but we had to pay the staff, we had to pay the bills, we had to get the place cleaned every day, you know. And so we had to have movies that made money, you know.
Yeah, and that's interesting. You know, you talked about the the quality of the writing went up once they started looking at it from a standpoint of business, which we kind of talked about before we came on. And in my opinion, it goes up because if you're approaching it from the standpoint of, yes, this is something that I'm creating. I am an artsy type of person. It's creative, but it's a product. So if I'm a consumer, putting myself, the screenwriter, in their shoes, if I'm the consumer, would I want to buy this? Would I want to invest 2 hours of my time in this? And if the answer is no, then you're saying to yourself, you know what? I need to go back and I need to clean this up. Because if I'm not willing to sit there, then how do I expect anyone else to sit there and take in the product that I'm placing? It's no different than if you go into a store and the shelves are messy. You're going to turn around and you're going to walk out, unless it's a crazy sale and you're trying to get, that hidden gem. But if as a consumer you're walking into a store and the shelves are not, neat, and the lighting's poor and the quality of the clothing is poor, that's not somewhere you're going to spend your money. So filmmakers cannot expect consumers, and I'm going to use that word a lot.
Yeah,
Filmmakers cannot expect consumers to make a purchase on an inferior product. But let me ask you this. What happens when you impart basically everything you just said and you get pushback? How do you get them to see the bigger picture? How do you get them to a place where you're telling them your product is going to market, and that if you do it this way, it has a much better chance of getting funding? And just let me give you an example of that. The interview that I saw with you, you were talking about a phenomenal friend, Debbie Richards' film, Move Me No Mountain, Move Me No Mountain. When you have a situation like that with something that can do well, but a certain thing needs to change and you're getting pushback, like you kind of got a little bit of pushback from her, how do you get them to see the bigger picture?
Well, I do my best with my clients, but I do like to say that I'm a business coach and I'm not the military. And so I don't go around to your house with a gun and tell you this is what you're going to do. Right. So, I go through a process. I have before anybody works with me, I have a process. They have a call with me, and it's an opportunity for me to see if somebody is going to be open-minded enough to take in new information, because for most filmmakers, it's really new information. It's just not a way. So, I'm only going to work with people who are willing to see things differently than they've ever seen it before, and are willing to try new things, So I think that's the first thing. Is in my industry as a coach, it's called, is somebody coachable? Is somebody coachable? Not everybody is coachable. And what I find is that what filmmakers have done before they work with me is they have privileged creativity, and they have minimized anything about the business. And actually, when we start to untangle that a little bit, and they realize, oh, what she's talking about actually is how I have my film connect to an audience. The fact is, all filmmakers want an audience. And so when they actually bring that together, then they're very open to all of the business thinking, because they realize, oh, I do want to connect to an audience. I'll give you the simplest idea, simplest thought. I have a client I was working with today, and she came up with a new title of her film. And the new title was Chiquita. And I said, what does that mean? And she was like, oh, it's a name. It's a person's name. And one of the things I always suggest is that filmmakers should not be calling their film titles a person's name, because the film title is the first time you have the opportunity to market your film.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I was talking to another client. This is my very busy coaching week, but anyway, I was talking to another client today, and we were looking at some comps. She's making a horror film, and we had some comps in her pitch deck, and one of them is called Terrifier 2. Mm. She said, it's a terrible film, but it was made for $250,000. It's made millions and millions and millions of dollars. She said, it's so bad. The acting is bad. The music is bad. Everything is bad. But you know what that title is? Terrifier tells you everything you need to know. It's a horror film. It's going to be nasty. You know, so
somebody's going to get chopped up.
Somebody's going to get, for sure.
There's some Texas Chainsaw Massacre about to happen somewhere in that film. Blood will be. What was that? There will be blood.
There will be blood. There you
that
go.
Type of you know what's coming with that title.
Blood, which is an amazing piece of art.
Yes, it is.
But it's called There Will Be Blood.
And you know what? That's a very simple title.
Yes.
And it's very to the point.
Yes.
Because when you see that title, There Will Be Blood, the first thing you say is, oh shit, something's going to happen to somebody, somewhere.
Quite a lot happens.
I need to watch to find out who, when, and why.
Yeah. Yeah. So the title is your first opportunity for marketing. Wow. The log line is usually the second. And if you're lucky, the poster. But, you know, because filmmakers are thinking about creativity, not marketing, they're not thinking, oh, I got to use the title to the best marketing advantage that I can, my log line. I tell people, I go to Sundance every year. You know, when you go to Sundance, you see all these films, and if they don't have famous people in, all you have is a title and a log line. That's it. You don't have any other thing to go by. Is this movie going to be good? Is it not going to be good? You have a title and a log line, one sentence. And so filmmakers need to use those marketing opportunities to market their films. But they're so busy writing their scripts, they're not thinking about marketing their films. But as I said, usually you were saying, well, how do you get somebody to think differently? Well, I mean, I have a lot of strategies, but I feel as though once filmmakers start to connect with, oh, this is how I get to an audience, they actually get pretty enthusiastic about it, about the business and the producing side. They've tended to be kind of like, I don't want to do that. I'm going to find somebody else because that uncreative person can deal with the business. That's really what they're thinking.
Wow.
But
see that
once they embrace it themselves and take it on themselves and realize, oh yeah, it's the same film that I wrote. It's the same film, but how do I actually get people to want to watch it? Then they get interested. Yeah. And of course, they're great storytellers. So marketing comes naturally.
Wow, that's amazing. And you know what? As you were talking, Christian Louboutin popped into my head because I was watching a video that he did the other day, and he was talking about the creative process. His clothing and his shoes are not cheap. And he is as creative as they come. But he also understands that I have to create and convey a feeling that would make someone want to spend that amount of money to purchase my product. I must admit, I am a Christian Louboutin owner. He has me in the store. Yes, I am. It is what it is. But it conveys a certain thing when you put those on. And he understands that, yes, this is a product, but I need to market it and cater it to a particular audience that will make someone want to put down a credit card for that amount of money. And I think that, and this is what I tell filmmakers all the time, don't just study successful filmmakers, Study successful people because success leaves clues. Success is transferable. So if you're looking at someone like that, what would make you go in a store and buy a Gucci bag for $3,000 when you can go to any store and get a handbag for $50?
Right.
Why would you go and spend that type of money? It's because they understand their audience. And that leads me to my next question. Can you talk about something that I talk about a lot? Professional production value and the importance of having that as far as your film is concerned, especially if you are asking someone to write you a check to help finance your film.
Yeah, I think that professional production values are kind of a bottom line, that just essential. And that's why I say I don't anymore say that you can do something that will get distribution for $25,000. I start at $40,000. But you know, I tell filmmakers this all the time. How long do you think it takes somebody in distribution to decide to distribute your micro budget film? So let's say it's a thriller, a horror, a family, a faith-based, or a documentary. How long do you think it takes them to make the decision if they should distribute your film or not? Just guess.
Boy, about you know what? Probably less than a week.
Well, I meant in terms of watching your film, and how long do they need to watch your film to know if they want to distribute it?
Well, as someone who's a film festival curator, it takes you a couple of minutes. It really does.
I've seen it happen in about 4 seconds.
Yeah, and that's a couple of minutes is generous.
Yeah, if you have a micro budget film, no names, it's in a genre that sells, then they only need to watch about 4 seconds to know this is a professional enough production value that I can distribute this film, right? So professional production values are absolutely a bottom line. It has to be there. And the reason that, you know, it's not so easy to start with an action film or a sci-fi film or anything like that is because it tends to be harder to do those for a micro budget. People have definitely done it and done it and been successful, but it's much harder to make those genres at a micro budget level. You tend to need to have more money if you want to do a lot of action or a lot of CGI, things like that. Yeah.
So let me see. You talked about film schools and how they rarely teach the business aspect of this. And it's interesting, when I listen to a lot of film podcasts, one of the things that a lot of veteran and very successful filmmakers always say is, I wish someone had told me about the business of this a lot sooner, because it would have saved me a lot of time and a lot of money. So why do you think it is that film schools, and it's interesting, why don't film schools teach business when they're turning out students into the world who they expect to make something that they want people to purchase money on? Why do you think that is?
Well, all the arts tend to be taught like that. You know, if you go to school to study painting, they teach you how to paint, but they don't teach you how to have a career and a business as a painter. That's just kind of the way the arts are taught. So that's one thing. Another thing is, I have a client, he is on his 4th feature film he's making with me. And I met him through his mother. He's a very young man. And he had graduated from NYU about a year before I met him. And he went to NYU. He learned a lot about filmmaking. And he said that what they were preparing him for was for a job in Hollywood. He was not interested in a job in Hollywood. He wanted to make his own films. So the film schools do tend to have that kind of model, which is, we're going to ready you for a job in Hollywood. And we're going to help with the connections so that you can do that. But if you want to be an independent producer and you don't want to go that route, then the film school is not set up for you. Another one of my clients, I'm half Trinidadian, he's from Tobago, and he said his dream, when I met him, his dream was to go to film school in the US, and his plan was to go into debt for about $150,000 to do it. And I was like, over my dead body. So we worked together. He ended up getting a Fulbright scholarship, and he went to the University of Florida in Tallahassee to film school, and everything was paid. The Fulbright pays your tuition, accommodation, travel, everything.
Wow.
Okay. And so he comes to the time he's making his master's thesis film, and he'd worked with me. So he was like, okay, I'm going to raise some money. And they said, oh, no, you're not. He said, what are you talking about? I'm going to raise some money to make my short film. And they said, no, you're not allowed to.
Wow.
And he was up in arms, and he really fought with them and never was allowed to do it. Wow. And as he pointed out to me, all the kids, because he wasn't a kid when he went to film school, you know, and he told them, look, I left Tobago to come here. I'm here for 2 years. I left my 2-year-old daughter to come and do this. You better be teaching me some good stuff. But he would never have spoken like that before he worked with me, you know. Wow. But you know, they refused to allow him to raise money. And he, as he pointed out, the rich kids in the school, they could spend as much as they wanted on the film. He wasn't a rich kid. So that's the other thing about film schools. You are not allowed to raise. Isn't that amazing?
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's very common.
Wow.
Very.
Wow. That makes absolutely no sense, because again, it goes to you're not okay. Even if you're preparing them for Hollywood, when you get to Hollywood, you still have to know how to raise money.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just because you're in Hollywood, I know plenty of people in Hollywood that have had to raise money.
Of course. Martin Scorsese has to raise money.
They all have to raise money. I'm not understanding. Well, no, you're not. You can't raise money here. So then when you get into the real world and find out how things really work, oh, in order for me to make this film, I need to raise money, and I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a missed opportunity.
With no funding and no distribution, you have no film.
Right.
That's really what it is. And film schools are not teaching anybody to have those kinds of skills. The way I see it is, you know, I've had a client who's the director of a film school, and I've had a client make a feature film who'd never been on a set before, didn't know the first thing, right? But in terms of their business skills, they had exactly the same level of skill, which was zero. Zero. Oddly enough, they both raised $67,000.
Wow.
They raised the same amount of money. I just put that 2 and 2 together. They both raised $67,000. Yeah. And now amazing. My client, the one who'd never she completely blew my mind one day, because we were friends, and she said, I want to make a movie. And I was like, well, what are you talking about? You work in engineering, you know? And now she's made a documentary that looks at the toxic racism and sexism at the highest levels of the corporate boardroom in England. Oh, wow. And right before she finished the film in January, she signed her first 2 $5,000 contracts where she shows some of the film and talks to an organization. Now she's signing 5-figure contracts.
Wow.
Yeah. She's all set to make more than 6 figures this year, her first year as a filmmaker.
That is absolutely amazing. So I just have a couple more questions for you. This has been so interesting. This is a masterclass. I know you probably saw me leaning because I've been taking notes. I've been taking notes because you know what? I'm like, look, I'm getting this game for free. and I'm writing stuff down. So hey, but let me you mentioned something the other day when I was looking at an interview that you had done, and I sat back in my seat because I had never heard this expression before.
Hmm.
Anti-marketing.
Oh, that's a new
That's
expression. That's a
that's
new.
kind of how I when you said that and then you explained it, I said, "Oh shit." If for nothing else, 50 minutes into this interview, can you explain what anti-marketing is? Now, but when you said it and explained it, I said, "Oh my gosh, so many filmmakers do this." So can you explain to the filmmaking audience and the people that are actually here that stay, because people have been going in and out, the people that are here, you're about to get some real game. So you are about to be above and you're about to be in front of all your other filmmaking friends with what Joanne is about to drop. So can you explain anti-marketing?
Well, anti-marketing is when a filmmaker engages in writing and things that are going to put people off watching their film.
Mm,
And so I gave the example before of using a name of as the title of your film. And filmmakers will get so attached to something like that. They'll be like, well, but it's called John Smith because he doesn't really have a character and nobody knows who he is and nobody, right? Or something. They'll start arguing about why this is so smart to have this name, John Smith, for their film. And it's just really funny. And they're just fighting and fighting to keep their film seen by as few people as possible, and there are so many things. I was just talking to a client. So he has Jim in his script. It starts out with Jim in his late 20s. Anything interesting about Jim? maybe something interesting. He has a bald spot that makes him embarrassed, or there's whatever.
Right. He's got to take his eye ticks.
Yeah, he's nervous and he doesn't feel confident as a man. Whatever, but nothing. Just so it's that same thing I was talking about, with look at the title, look at the log line, are you selling your film? My favorite class that I teach, it's not the one that is the most attended, but my favorite class I teach is called Writing a Log Line That Sells. Because, as I said, your title and your log line, the only chance you have to sell your film. So if you write a really boring log line, one of my clients the other day, I said, can you tell everyone the log line of your film? And he said, oh, it's about abalone poaching in South Africa. I was like, wow, that was some anti-marketing.
Yeah. I'm really excited to see that.
Really excited to see that.
Can't you tell?
and it's actually an incredibly exciting story, incredibly exciting, but he wasn't selling it. So, but anti-marketing is because, as I said, filmmakers, even though they're great storytellers, are not taking that step to sell their film to somebody who wants to see it. They're not thinking about that person putting the money out to pay the ticket to go see their film. And so when I emerged from my long years of illness, I realized, I have a very unusual set of skills. I come from the education side. I taught script writing. I taught production. I ran a media arts organization. I ran a film school. All of that's education side. But I also have the experience of working with distributors, working with marketing, working with press, selling tickets. And I figured if I could just get filmmakers to make that connection, if I'm going to write a script, I have to sell a ticket. If a filmmaker makes that connection and gets it that, oh, I'm making my film, as you call it, a product for somebody to pay to see. How do I get that person to want to see my film?
Question about crowdfunding. And you know what? Before we do that, I was actually someone who did the anti-marketing years ago when I made my feature film. I'm not even going to tell you what the title was.
Oh, I want to know now.
Oh, good Lord. The title, and because I'm trying to be that guy. I'm trying to be, oh God. You know what? I'll tell you when we go off
By
camera.
the way, how long are we going to be on? Because I didn't put the lights on. It's got dark.
Dark. We're a couple more minutes. More minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you when we go off here, because that title was just amazing. So, you know what? Let me ask you this, and we're about to close this out. What would be the advice you would give to anyone looking to raise capital for their project? What would be some advice you would give them?
Well, so a term I use a lot that's not an industry term is business model. So whatever budget you want to raise for your film, whether it's $100,000, $500,000, $5 million, there is always a business model that works. But most of the time, because filmmakers have not been trained in fundraising, they have not been trained in any of this business stuff, they often put the wrong business model to the wrong budget. I have a client who, before he worked with me, raised $1.7 million to make a film. And that film has done exceptionally well, I would say, for what it is. It's made $330,000. That is not good business. But he was using the wrong business model for the film, and he did not know what the right business model was. If he had been working with me, we'd have two choices, because in fundraising, you can either raise more money or spend less money. Right? You get the numbers together, you either raise more. So he raised $1.7 million, but he didn't use the strategies for a $1.7 million movie. Right? But there were strategies that he could have used. He just wasn't aware of them. He thought, like a lot of people, if I have $1.7 million, I'm going to make a movie that's going to make a ton of money. But he didn't know what he needed to know.
How do you know how to spend that $1.7 million?
He knew how to spend it, and he knew how to make a movie. He just didn't know how to make the money back. And now, actually, last week I mentioned earlier, I got 2 emails from 2 different filmmakers. He's in Georgia. And then my other client who made a film in Nepal. They're both in post-production. And he sent me about 5 minutes of the film, and it looks really, really great. So he made a film this year. And what I said to him was, my first question for somebody who's lost a lot of money on a movie before they start working with me is, are your investors the kind of people who are going to come and break your legs? He said no. I said, okay, good. Are they the kind of people who would speak to you again? And he said, well, some of them would and some of them wouldn't. And I said, well, for the ones who would, how would you feel about going back to them and saying, I'm going to work with somebody who is going to ensure that the next film makes money? He said, okay, I think I can do that. So he went back and he got this time he made a film for $150,000. And it's going to make money. But he just had the wrong business model. He used the business model, actually not of $100,000 movie. He used the business model of a $100,000 movie, and he spent $1.7 million. Wow. So there's always a business model that works, but when you raise money, whether I teach 7 ways of raising money, but you can, as I said, this number can go higher and higher and higher, and then you've got to do something to make sure that that number that you're raising, that you've put enough strategies in place to make sure that the film is going to bring more money than that back. But whatever budget level you're at, it's always possible to do that. You just have to use strategies to make sure that that money is going to come back. I don't think I answered your question. But
You did. You did.
Okay.
Yes, you most definitely did, because again, as you were talking, I'm writing notes.
You
I'm
do that
writing notes.
very discreetly.
Yeah, well, you know what? I do it, and I'm left-handed, so my writing is, scribbly scrabbly anyway, so I can understand what I wrote. So what's next?
Well, I have this goal that I want to get to the point where we have 10 movies a year coming out. Right now we're at about 5. So I just, I'm just very, very happy to work with filmmakers and make more movies. And I got 2 new clients this week. Oh, and I have a new client who's making a VR feature, virtual reality. I'm super excited about that because I haven't worked with VR for a while. But I just love working with filmmakers. I love seeing them raise the money they need to get their films made, and then I help them with distribution. So, yeah. And one day I'm going to change the name of my business from Filmmaker Success to Second Film, because what I really believe in is that the first film, especially when you're making a micro budget film, the first film, there's so much to learn. It's such a huge learning curve. And so I try to make the mountain a little bit smaller, raise money. I help them with the fundraising, raise money, get the film made, get distribution, get onto the second film, and get onto the second film without being in debt, without having killed yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually, physically, any of those things. Just make it through the first film, get onto the second film. So one day I'm going to call my business Second Film.
Awesome.
And as I said, I have clients now who are on their second, third, fourth, fifth film working with me.
Wow.
It's awesome.
That's absolutely amazing. So where can people find you? If someone wanted to utilize your services, where could they find you?
Well, my website is filmmakersuccess.com. That's easy. You can email me at joanne@filmmakersuccess.com. And on social media, I am Joanne Film. I'm at Joanne Film on Facebook, Instagram, everything.
Okay. Well, this has been absolutely amazing. This was so informative, and I learned so much. And again, it was just such a pleasure finally meeting you in person. You definitely have to come back, because I basically had to put a couple of cards aside with so many other questions that I wanted to ask you, but your sunlight has left, so we can't have you sitting in the dark. We can't have you sitting in the dark. It's like, she's a filmmaker and she ain't even got no good lighting over there.
I thought about it at the beginning. I thought, I think I should put the lights on, but
no, you're fine. You're fine. But this has been absolutely amazing, and thank you for coming on and imparting such amazing knowledge to the audience. And ladies and gentlemen, do yourself a favor and listen to this podcast at least 2 to 5 times, because you're going to learn something new each time that you listen. And it has just been an absolute pleasure learning from you today, as well as interviewing you. I truly enjoyed it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed the podcast, please follow me on YouTube and subscribe to the podcast on Apple and wherever else you can find a conversation with. And again, thank you, Joanne Butcher, my amazing guest, who has over 100 filmmakers, over 20 films in distribution. And on the street, that would be called street cred, because she has street cred. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for coming out and kicking it with us on a conversation with. And as always, love this like a hobby, but treat it like a business. Have a phenomenal night. All right, everyone. Good night.